I've got a question first of all. Who, in an event like this, who doesn't like putting their hands up in the air? Put your hands up. There's a couple, okay. Right. What makes a great UX designer? Any issues? Can you see anything there? Any problems? Hands up if you can see anything. There's one, there's a couple just starting to go up, you're starting to twig now. What makes a great UX designer? I've had an extra great in there. I don't know if you've seen that little image before, but you can, as a UX designer, you can throw in little bits of content that does throw people off, so attention to detail is really key. I'll give you a little bit of introduction to myself. So I started in UX in 1998, 97. Heard the word usability first of all. There was no UX companies back then in the UK. I got all my information from America, and even Australia was in front of us at that point of time. I kicked off usability and accessibility at Halifax, set up a team, had quite a large team that built up. I worked at Direct Line, over in Aviva, Covea Insurance, quite a few different companies. In that space, I've interviewed and worked with a lot of UX designers. I've been a UX designer, and I've seen what it's like from the bottom end and also higher up the ladder. So let me click through then onto CV. Do you like what I did there? A little Citroen CV, anyone that knows their cars? A bit sneaky. This is just a little quick bit. So CV. I do see a lot of CVs where there may be just one page and it's just not quite enough information for me to decide, should I interview this person? Talk about your design process, not in big paragraphs of text, but you need to get across the point that I don't just produce a wireframe and that's it. I don't just do pretty pictures. The other key point I've got in there is how have users informed your designs? Have you had research done? So I talk to so many designers that haven't spent time with users. On the portfolio side, again, it's fantastic to see. I often, again, see portfolios where you just see the final product. I want to see the initial scamps I've got there, competitor research, the low def and high def wireframes. Show me your journey all the way through your portfolio. I want to see those initial scamps because some people grab other people's work and say, this is mine. If you've seen the scamp and the little image you've done, you know, sometimes I'll use a notepad and start drawing away. So show that journey. I've put in there as well research, A/B testing as well, really valuable. Soft skills. So when I joined the Leeds Building Society last year in April. There was a small team, been around a few years' experience. The wonderful thing I found with the team was they had so much team spirit. They really worked for each other. They were really collaborative, great team players. So I want to make sure when I built the team up further since I've been here, it was really key I kept that momentum, that you know, everyone really supported each other. It's absolutely key. Organised as well. One thing I see from designers, not everyone is particularly organised. So it's really key that you take notes. If I give an instruction, I want that person to have written a little note down, and then on the Friday after I've said, you know, I want you to do this by this date, on Friday. If I have to chase them up, I know they've actually not listened or they've not taken that note down. And that's quite common. So again, taking little notes is really important. So you're organised. So if I'm chasing you, that means you aren't as organised as you maybe think you are. Great listener, absolutely key. You know, we now use Zoom a lot, don't we? And so from Zoom, you've got distractions like mobile phones. You will be distracted. So keep in that room, keep focused. If you're in the meeting, then that's, you know, you should be focused on to everyone. And then great influencing, so that's really key. So the easiest way I've been able to influence over the years is by bringing up evidence of users. So when I've said, this is the best way to do a search box or how to do the mega menu, for example, I can call upon all the user research I've done over the years, observe those user behaviour, say, actually, I know users will go through this really quickly. They'll fly through this isn't a problem. I've seen where people get really stuck and, just completely stuck. So I can provide what's really going to work first time, which is really valuable. So that really helps our influencing skill as well, because when you're just arguing against, okay, I like this, I like a blue version, or I like a grey button, if you can say, actually, I know blue buttons work better than grey buttons, then great. That's not a good example, but you get the idea. In fact, I'm looking at this screen here, and I'm one in front of myself, so that's the list there. Hard skills. So I got this from one of my designers when I worked at Covea, called Tom. He had an Illustrator version of this, so this is what I call UX Skills Matrix, and this is really valuable to use for both my side as well as from a designer's perspective. So I know it's very small, so let me zoom in a little bit for you. So when I pulled together the team, or when I was starting to talk to the team earlier this last year, I wanted to look through all the different concepts, all the different areas of UX which I put together there. So you can probably see facilitating focus groups, persona creation, competitor analysis, wireframing, prototype hotspots or prototype interactive. There's a whole list. So I was able to look at everyone, chat them through each of those segments and decide, okay, what level are you at the moment? So the different levels you had here, so maybe the mid one there we've got there, requires no help in executing the skill, knows what can be done unaccompanied, has a high level of experience and exposure to the skill, can provide guidance to help on others. So as a manager, I could see the setup of the team and where they were weak, what areas needed. Did we need more user research? Did we need more the accessibility, for example? I've changed the names so that I don't actually have any Sandras or Dans or Fionas or Emmas and Pats and Jims in the team. And forgive me if you're colourblind, but I use this myself. This is my personal use. So at the time, as the team started to build up, and that's now double the size now, I used a little marker for myself to show actually what areas were weak. So you can see at the time, accessibility auditing was weak and accessibility knowledge. So I knew I needed to get something with accessibility skills. User research was very weak when I first joined. So again, I highlighted that to bring in people. And then I sit down individually with each person and then decide, okay, everyone's different. Who likes facilitating? And they'll talk through us. Actually, I'm not really comfortable with facilitating. I don't want to do one-to-one sessions. I do love my creative design, so I'd know, okay, I'm not going to move you into that area or get you involved. But if you love prototyping, then great, I know we can focus on that. So typically, what I would also do is in objectives and personal development plans, we'd look through and maybe choose the top 3 things first of all and say, okay, what do you want to do for this year? What do you want to focus? Where do you want to get better? Is it persona creation? We can go through that and get that into your PDP and objectives. And each staff member could also see where they are and see where the scores are starting to rise up, and we're producing evidence to show how they're developing as well, which is really valuable. And typically I've just little marked there, and I know probably some of you at the back of the room probably won't be able to read the text, but some of the key things I've put there as a UX designer you should be able to do heuristic expert reviews. And you can only really do a good expert review if you've spent time with users and observing user behaviour, and that's absolutely key, and it's going to be a key part of this presentation. Competitor analysis. Again, not everyone will automatically think about competitors. You want to go in and review competitors, and not just inside your own industry. So I work at a bank or a building society, but I do look at other industries as well. It's really key. It's not, how Facebook does their search or how they do their mega menus or whatever it'll be. Do look through other industries, absolutely key. It's part of it. Session replay. How many people here use a sort of session replay? So that could be Hotjar, could be Session Cam. There's a couple of hands, not many. So having the session replay software has been really valuable again, because you can observe users' behaviour. So as they go through the sequence of screens, you can see what are they clicking on, what buttons are they getting confused, are they going backwards and forward, are they clicking on the wrong buttons? So having a session replay software is really valuable to see on your website or your application forms, really valuable. Wireframing, obviously basic. You've got prototyping hotspots and then prototyping interactive. So I use Azure, and my team uses Azure, and one of the key things there is I like to see, when we do our user testing, to see what do people actually type into those input boxes. The buttons they click, so you can use Figma, you can use other hotspot tools, and that's really easy a hotspot, you're just navigating through and popping through screens. But Azure will give you that detail you need to see. I need to see what users are actually typing in. I want to see them dropping down on menus and selecting options and see, is it really that easy to use or not? And the great thing is, say, we also use Figma for our wireframing, but we can take all the Figma assets and we can then export them into Azure, and then all the individual assets are there, and you can just, sometimes it's a little bit clunky, but visually you can create a prototype quite quickly from that. Responsive design, probably don't need to say much more on responsive design, but yeah, I've seen designers where they'll just design the desktop version, or they'll just design the mobile first version, and then it gets a bit messy when you try to actually, you've done the desktop, how does it then look on mobile? Is that going to work? And vice versa. So someone may be mobile first, they'll design the mobile screens, so the whole sequence of screens, and then they think, okay, how does it look for the desktop user? And suddenly there's loads of space around and it's not working very well for desktop users. So they've wasted their space. What I always recommend is actually do it together at the same time. So you produce that desktop screen, and at the same time, by the side of it, you've got your mobile version as well in Figma. So you can say, okay, I've got the desktop screen, I've got these elements, and how's that going to filter down into that mobile version? Yep, I've got it work. I can change that and it'll work. Okay, so that's really effective. User psychology. So when I first started, back in the late 90s, as I mentioned, we just want to make things easy to use. That was our journey. As UX designers, you wanted to just make things easy to use, as slick as possible to go all the way through the journey. We didn't really consider about the psychology at that point. It wasn't until I joined Direct Line where I really started to dig a lot deeper into psychology. And one example is you really need to understand the user's mindset. So great, you've got people landed on your website, you really need them to then, why would they actually click on the button? Why would they actually buy this product? What's their user mindset? So the time I've spent with users, some people are concerned about security. They may fill in and get a quote, but then actually they'll phone up instead and use a call centre and waste the extra effort on the call centre because they're concerned about security, don't want to give our security details across. And it is less secure by telephoning up and giving your card details over the telephone than it is online. But do we always tell users that? Do we give them that? Do we get that part across? That if you're concerned about security, you do realise this is wherever you want to word it, because I'm not a copywriter, 128-bit encryption. You can be safe and secure with our service if you use our online forms. Naturally, style guide. I've got visual design as a UX designer. Accessibility knowledge. Again, hopefully you've heard a lot more about accessibility because this is really built up. I got involved in accessibility in '94. Spent time with the RNIB, Dyslexia Association, started to build up that knowledge of different types of users. So as a UX designer, it's really important to understand all your user types, which I'm going to show you in a second. And then when you sit down and observe user behaviour, there's obviously A/B testing will then refine it more. So you'll probably get 80% of your big issues out with user testing. With A/B testing, as you'll probably know, you can really refine stuff. You can just tweak, actually, do I just curve the corner on this button? Does that make a difference? Does more people actually click on the button just because I've got a curved corner or the change in the colour of it? So it can really refine as a designer. You can really actually get lots more value from A/B testing. And then understanding, the last one I've just highlighted there is understanding front-end dev capabilities. So if you don't know what you can do technically, then you can be producing stuff pie in the sky and say, actually, we just can't do that with our system we've currently got. Just being close to our developers is really key understanding. When I worked at the Halifax, we used to try to push our developers a lot, and I'd sit down and I'd talk to a developer and say, look, can you do this? We'd love to have this mega menu that opens up in this way. And they'd say, no, I can't do this. So I'd actually then go and walk over to one of the senior developers who's been around for a long time, and they say, yeah, I can make this work. I can make this work. So you can't always trust maybe more some of the junior developers, and I do love about pushing the developer, but you do make sure you do check, obviously, with the more senior developers if they can push that. But yeah, understanding the front-end dev capability is really key. Personas. So last year I introduced what I call smart personas into the group. So we have marketing personas, so who are the types of people we need to market to. I needed to make sure that as a UX team we had smart personas. So what I've tried to do here is remove the fluff. I don't want to know whether someone's got 12 dogs and they live in Doncaster and they've got a Ford Focus car. But I do need to know whether they are concerned about security. I do need to know whether they've got dyslexia. So we can see Guy there. So yeah, so what I've also done to the personas, we've added in some of the traits from accessibility as well. So Guy's got dyslexia. We've got Alice, who's got can't read my text now. Suffers from anxiety. I'm going to look at this; it's going to be even bigger, isn't it? So those people that suffer from anxiety, if you ever fill in online forms, at the end of the form, you do need to show back about, okay, let's relate what is the information I've just put it in. I've put in my postcode, my address details, email addresses. If you suffer from anxiety, you're quite concerned, actually, I've got this right. If you've got a review page, They can very quickly check, okay, oh yeah, you've got my postcode right, you've got my date of birth right, that's great. So that helps people from suffering from anxiety as one example. There's a few others there as well. So I've got good old Claudia, who's partially sighted. I've spent a lot of time with people who are partially sighted and seeing how they zoom right into the screen. They can only see like a word or two at a time. It's fascinating how people can lose stuff at the moment. And very quickly, so these smart personas, they do feed into our primary personas. So marketing and commercial have got the primary personas. So on this one, they've got an ambitious risk taker. So there's different percentages potentially that feed into that persona. We may have someone who's affluent saver, and again, those percentages will change, but each one of these will feed into that information. So being a graphic UX designer, knowing the information, what the needs and the frustrations are, is really key. So it's knowing your users, and that's really key as a UX designer. I don't know how, this is from 2016 on the Gov website now. I don't know if have you seen, put your hands up if you've seen this at all. So that's good. So again, it informs you. You start to know about dyslexia. Again, we've talked about large contents of copy, not using italic fonts, really key. So there's lots of really good tidbits from this. It's not been updated lately to 2.1, but there's some really great information to understand, because as a UX designer, you need to have a picture in your head of all these different types of designers. So whether it's low vision, we mentioned about anxiety, physical motor disabilities. I worked with one person at Shaw Trust that David, my accessibility consultants, come from, and he could only move his head, and he was actually just going through an online form and clicking through with his head, going through the keys, and it took a long time to fill in this form. And at the end of the form, you could see the relief on his face. They'd finished the form, he clicked on the submit button, and it said timed out. It'd been too long. So at that point, I had to speak to IT security to say, we can't have a 10-minute timeout on our online forms. It's not long enough. For something like this, it's just crucifying. So we managed to increase the timeout significantly to get everyone through. So until you use the test that, you didn't realise the impact it could have even on a simple timeout situation. Obviously, people with screen readers and autistic spectrum, probably a lot of people don't realise that you don't use really long, bright colours. As a designer, you may like to add lots of colours, but if you suffer from autism, it's not ideal for people with autism. And the software that we use, so originally when I first joined here last year, we basically primarily just used Figma as the main one, and we had Usability Hub. So I mentioned before about Figma, you can take the assets into Azure, which is great, so you make these fully interactive prototypes, really key for user testing. We've got the Adobe Creative Suite. We use Content Square here, so again, that's a session replays like I've mentioned. Dynamapper, I don't know if anyone, put your hands up if you've heard of Dynamapper at all. So Dynamapper is a visual tool. You can go in, you'll map out all the websites. So on our website, we've actually got thousands of pages. And until we actually ran Dynamapper, we didn't realise quite how many pages there were. And Dynamapper actually has little thumbnail images, so you can go in, you can see the home page, you can zoom into that home page, or you can zoom back out and you can see all the little thumbnails of how it's all sequenced up. The great news is you can also do the same. You can look at our competitors. So we've got Skipton and Yorkshire Building Society. We've mapped out everyone's websites. We can see how many pages they've got in their mortgages sections, how many they've got in savings, for example. So it's been really valuable. And it's also got an accessibility function. So we were able to test the accessibility of our website and compare it to our peers and see, actually, are we at the bottom of the table or mid-table or not? We've still got a long way to go with accessibility here. And I don't know if you've looked at our Leeds Building Society website. We've still got a long way to go from the UX side on that as well. User Zoom, so we use that from our research function. I've got Amy at the end, at the back, our senior user researcher. So User Zoom's been a fantastic tool. I don't know if you, again, put your hands up if you've heard of User Zoom before. So there's a few more, which is great. And then just for our collaborative work, Miro and FigJam. And again, that's been great just to be able, using FigJam, getting staff members to mess about in FigJam and seeing what people put in the little notes live is really valuable. We also put together a process as well, because again, when I first started, some of the staff, they just produced wireframes and they'd chat to each other, which was a great bit, the collaborative bit. And then they literally hand the wireframe straight to the developer, and that was their process. So I had to very quickly install the typical process to be involved in. So I spoke to SEO, I spoke to analytics, and they said, I'm not being involved quick enough. SEO wasn't being involved early enough. Analytics wasn't being involved early enough. Even accessibility wasn't brought to the day at that point. So if I zoom in a little bit more, and so we've got discovery, defined, design phase. Let's zoom in a little bit more on there. So again, yeah, so it was to remind the developers, or sorry, the UX designers, to go through what process I need to do, you know, don't leave SEO to the last minute, or accessibility. Remember about doing competitor analysis, because you can very quickly miss a few bits and pieces without realising. So it's almost a very quick checkpoint, so you can just click checkpoint, yeah, I've done that, and you can go through and think, yeah, actually, we've got everything covered. Some of the great resources, I don't know if you've ever seen the first one, so AM Institute, so it's a headline analyzer tool, really valuable. So if you want to send out an email and you want more people clicking onto your email than ever, then use this tool to analyse your headline. So as a copywriter, you can just try out different tools, and we had a bit of a play once with a headline analyzer. Really valuable, and it scores how good you are at copywriting, basically, whether it's following empathy, for example, different variations. But a great little tool. Unsplash, have you heard of Unsplash? So I started to use this a few years ago when they only literally had 100 photos on. So these are really high definition, royalty-free images. Really useful little tool as a designer. Dino Mapper, as I've mentioned, again, a great tool, quite cost effective. Now Baymard. Now put your hands up if you've heard of Baymard before. There's a few in the audience. Now I was introduced to this by my son, Nathan, who's a UX researcher. Fantastic piece of information. So if you don't get a chance to do much research, go onto Baymard. They have a whole library of research materials that have been done. So if you are building a mega menu, designing a mega menu, if you're looking at input boxes, search boxes, anything you can think of, they've literally got it on Baymard. Have a look through. There is a free version of it. It only shows, I think, 5% of the research at that point. But if you pay, I can't remember if it's about £1,000 or something for the team, but everyone in the team can use it, go on and find some really fantastic research. As I mentioned about utilise a session replay app, so Content Square, Session Cam, Hotjar, really valuable. And the big one again is your users. So I've spent so long with users, user experience designers that haven't spent time with users. I would probably say more UX designers I've come across haven't spent time or observed any users than they have. So that's absolutely key. So to be a great UX designer, you actually want to, UX designer, you want to experience users, XU. Experience users first as a designer. If you experience users, you will be a great UX designer. That's it.